Hi, this is Misha, and this video is on the real, or at least the original, Bird of Prey seen in Star Trek. The Romulan version from the Star Empire. And I've got two types here. I have the version as seen in the Enterprise series, so 22nd century. This would have been the version probably used during at least some of the Romulan Earth War. And then we have the more famous version here, seen in a few episodes of the original series, so 23rd century. Now there's not a lot to go on as far as information, specs, or any of that, which is a common theme with the alien vessels, but Romulans in particular seem to kind of get short shrift on that. This version is seen in Enterprise in Season 2 in the episode Minefield. What we know about it for sure, it has a cloak, which annoys a lot of canon fans. And there was originally maybe going to be a bird on the underside, but there ended up not being. And that's what we know. These ships come on screen, threaten, and then leave. They cloak, uncloak, cloak again. That's it. That's what we know. We know a little more about the one from the original series. First seen in episode 9. To my mind, this is really the first alien ship we really see in the original series. There are some things like the Viserys that we see, but those earlier ones tended to be more of a glowing collection of lights and things. This was the first true model, at least to my mind, that we really see. And it has the very distinctive bird on the underside. The war chicken. We see the inside of it on multiple scenes. It's actually one of the few alien ships we see the bridge of quite a bit in the original series. About the only one, really. It's very cramped inside, very submarine-esque, which was the intention. We know that it had a forced plasma torpedo, which was very effective. It had limited range and speed. We know that this version, the original, had a pulse-style disruptor. And while we know this one's primary weapon was its experimental plasma torpedo, since it was experimental, we can assume it also had the disruptors, if nothing else, for backup use. These are pretty much the same size. This is said to be 130 meters. And this is 131, which is pretty much the same. Couple of things that are controversial about these ships. For this one, it's the warp, or rather lack thereof. And for this one, it's the fact that it had cloak. Let me tackle the warp thing first. It is absolutely ridiculous to think that the original Bird of Prey did not have warp speed. Sorry, it is. For multiple reasons. For one, I think some people really just don't understand how large interstellar space is. You couldn't get anywhere without superluminal light speed. And some people try to keep this as a subwarp ship by saying, well, a carrier drops them off. Even if that were the case, it would have to drop it off like 1,000 miles away. I mean, it's just space travel. It doesn't happen like that. And this was encountered in the neutral zone. And it went from one outpost to another, destroying several in a row. So unless the outposts were pretty much across the block from each other, basically unless they were treated like Starbucks, where there was one across the street from each other, for it to go from one to the other, blowing them up, it had to have gone to warp. I mean, the carrier was not going to drop it off, pick it up, drop it off, pick it up, drop it off. That's not logical. Why would it? Plus, we've never seen that kind of behavior anywhere else in Star Trek. Beyond that, guys, it has warp nacelles right here. But what else would these to be? They're not weapons, because we see the torpedo coming out here in the front and in the back. Here we have impulse engines. So what are those? They have to be warp engines. Like I said, this was patterned after a submarine. So I think the original intention was, while it was cloaked, while a lot of the power and all that was going to the cloaking device, it could not go to warp. Much like how when a submarine is submerged, especially in World War II terms, it was going much slower, operating on battery power versus diesel power. And I think that was what they were meaning to get at, was when this was cloaked, it was like it was operating on batteries, and when it was uncloaked, it was like it was operating on analogous to diesel. So uncloaked, it, I'm sure, was able to go to warp speed. Now maybe limited warp, maybe not as fast as the Enterprise, sure, why not? Because they do mention that they've been away from home in the episode Balance of Terror for months. So if it takes months to get from Romulus to the neutral zone, maybe this was going at relatively slow warp. You know, warp 3 maybe, 4, who knows. But it definitely had some warp facilities it had to have had. As far as the crew, we really don't know, but several. I mean, 130 meters front to back, and it's quite wide, and it was pretty cramped inside. So much like a submarine, they probably packed them in. Probably 100 people at least, maybe more. So what about our second one over here from a century earlier? That first one was encountered in 2366, and the humans were surprised that it had a cloaking device. This was encountered in 2252 or 53, doesn't matter, you get the idea. And it was also cloaking. While I really appreciate that when they did the Romulans in Enterprise, they went with a more or less recognizable design. Even going back to the 1960s, they could have so easily tried to, copy something more like a Warbird from Next Generation. I think it's nice that they actually tried to make it look more retro. Good on them. I agree that cloak was not necessary, but we got it. So a lot of people say this was an experimental ship, the cloak failed, and therefore it wasn't used again. Okay, fair enough, that works. I will also remind you that twice in the original series, we went through this cloaking thing. When this ship was encountered in Season 1, it was said to be the first time they saw a cloak. And then in Season 3, during the Enterprise incident, again, the whole reason that Kirk was secretly ordered to go through the neutral zone was because they said Romulus was developing a cloaking device. They didn't say a new one, a better one, they just said a cloaking device. So in Season 3, they apparently had forgotten all about this from Season 1. And we're doing it all over again. Now, of course, most people retcon it saying that the one from 3 was an improved cloaking device. Fair enough, I can accept that. Because this one, when it was cloaked, you could still see a shadow on sensors. So the one maybe from Season 3, you couldn't. My point is, the original series was not always that consistent either. They weren't really caring about canon as much. It was meant to be episodic, where you could watch any episode in any order, and they had no idea it would be watched, as it has become over the decades since. It was just a show. So we can say again, this one maybe had a Generation 1 cloak, very first style. And this one had a Generation 2, a much more advanced style. And that's not even taking into account what Discovery's done to the whole cloaking thing since Enterprise. So if people can accept, or whatever, what Discovery's done with Klingons and cloak and all that, I can accept this. I just think it's a cool ship. I was really happy when Eagle Moss announced this ship, and it came out relatively early in the collection, within the first year and a half or so. So, this was originally made as a CGI model. This is probably one of the few, if only, physical models. It's said that they wanted to put the bird on the bottom, the designers wanted to, but they were vetoed, and that if the Romulan War had been allowed in Season 5, they would have shown them painting the birds on for that war, which would have been a neat kind of nod, kind of like the whole Klingon forehead thing in Season 4. But they tried. This was actually supposed to appear in Season 4, the Forge trilogy, taking place on Vulcan, but it didn't. The original Bird of Prey here was a physical model, but not a very high detailed one. It was made out of wood at first, and then kind of an injection molded styrene. It was about 2-3 feet long, wide, not a very big thing, but it wasn't terribly highly detailed, but it got the job done for 1960s TV screen. It was originally filmed for the Balance of Terror episode, and then that same footage was reused in Season 2. A lot of people don't realize that. The Deadly Years. Remember seeing that as a kid. Reruns, of course. I'm not that old, guys. So it was in 2 episodes originally, and then this was added in a 3rd episode when they remastered the Enterprise incident. Originally, that episode featured 3 Romulan-controlled D7s. Well, when they did Enterprise incident, they replaced one of the D7s with a CGI Bird of Prey here. They had to use a CGI, for one, because the original wouldn't have stood up to scrutiny today on high definition, and 2, the original model was lost or destroyed, depending on which story. I like the story that Wang broke it, because it just makes me really happy to imagine him out, not happy, but yeah, seeing him out in the backyard with a big hammer just smashing the dog shit out of his model, because they were being complete idiots, but that's what unions in Hollywood are good at. I digress, and I'll shut up now about that, because you guys don't care about my opinions about Hollywood, do you? So yeah, the original Bird of Prey, and a very good spiritual successor, in homage to it from Enterprise. This kind of also reminds me of the Batwing from 1989 Batman, with the curved nacelles, and yeah, I like this design a lot. It's cool. And this definitely had warp, no question about it. So why would this have warp from that episode? And then they would drop warp later. Romulans were an offshoot of Vulcans, and Vulcans were very advanced, so it had warp. I think the Romulan War is a very interesting thing, and I hope one day we really see it on screen, at least in a canon capacity, because I think there's an interesting story there. Maybe one day. Well, I'm trying to do a few more alien ships here for you guys, because it's very Starfleet heavy, because most of our ships are from Starfleet. So I hope this was something a little interesting. If you have any questions or just want to talk about nerd-related stuff, feel free to do it in the comments. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I will catch you next time.